As reported in Music Business Worldwide, Spotify launched its legal action against the publisher and Cobalt after 8 Mile Style sued Spotify in the US last year, alleging that Spotify lacked licenses for nearly 250 Eminem songs. Spotify suggested in its claim that although the underlying infringement claim by 8 Mile lacks merit, it is Cobalt that bears the ultimate responsibility should 8 Mile prevail. Now, 8 Mile Style has just filed suit again, and this time the publisher is aiming a number of serious allegations at Spotify and US-based mechanical rights organization Harry Fox Agency. At the center of the case, 8 Mile accuses HFA of a joint conspiracy with Spotify to distribute fraudulent documents and misrepresentations designed to conceal and enable Spotify's infringement of the 8 Mile compositions. The filing suggests that Cobalt was tricked into believing that Spotify had compulsory licenses and into accepting royalty statements distributed by HFA on behalf of Spotify, and was further tricked into believing that 8 Mile is being accounted to properly. Sam, I really love the fact that Eminem's camp tries to keep the industry in check. If we go back to 2007, Eminem sued Apple, which was for the second time, saying the publishers had not given Apple permission to offer the artist music for download, which was eventually settled out of court. And then in 2009, Eminem's publishing company at the time, FBT Productions, sued Universal Music Group for $1.6 million in alleged unpaid royalties, which was all about the definition of what a download is. That they claim download should fall under the licensing agreements, while Universal said they are governed by distribution arrangements, which would have the lower royalty rates. So with that history in mind, what do you have on this current lawsuit?
So this is a really interesting one. It's a lot of fun for a sort of industry titan clashing, junkie like me. I love when these sort of like mountains get moved that really kind of change the landscape for the rest of us. So contextually speaking, I thank you for giving the sort of background on the Eminem stuff, because Eminem's camp historically has been really, really aggressive and early on making sure that rights are in check. And basically just the result of a lot of this stuff is Eminem and the folks who came before that suit end up getting treated fairly, in accordance with, typically Eminem's camp is right about the way that they attack it. But then the unintended consequences after the fact, everybody else who comes in the system after gets subject to new legal language. Things get a little bit hairy. So if, for example, Eminem, as a result of his lawsuit with Universal, gets a 50-50 split for his downloads and again for his streaming as performances or broadcasts as opposed to sales, akin to a CD, Universal is going to tweak the language on those contracts and make sure that artists that come after don't get the benefit from 50%. They get the 20 or 15 or whatever the rate ends up being. I've had experience with this in management where an artist signed to Universal ends up getting a really low rate even on streaming, but that's just kind of the contract that's on offer. We don't have the ability to negotiate that out, especially without having Eminem's kind of clout. Now, Eminem's clout, his sales history, his position as one of the largest artists of all time is fundamental to the addition of Harry Fox Agency to the existing lawsuit that 8 Mile Style, which is a company that holds the assets for the music from that film and potentially some other catalog. I'm not exactly sure as to what they do hold, but I know that this specific at issue are some of the songs from the film 8 Mile. Originally filed with regard to Spotify and then third party with Cobalt as sort of a middleman in the process of accounting royalties. Harry Fox got added to this suit recently on the basis of the fact that Harry Fox, like you mentioned, is complicit and even abetting this sort of gross fraud when it comes to mechanical royalty payments. Now, to be clear, it's one-sided right now. This is just one side. This is the plaintiff's complaint. We need to see a response from Spotify and a response from Harry Fox, but it's scathing. It's really, really, really tough to see how, first off, any of this isn't demonstrably true, and also how it isn't going to be the nail in the coffin for an organization like HFA, which has been plagued by sort of these issues for a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, in the filing, and I know you went through it in much more detail, but this, and using scathing, I mean, this is, continuing to find like defendants engaged in their fraudulent scheme in a joint effort. And then we have 4 points here: conceal Spotify's failure to acquire timely compulsory mechanical licenses, deceive Cobalt and 8 Mile into accepting royalties that were based on statutory rates, deceive Cobalt and 8 Mile into accepting royalties that were based on false usage information, and to avoid the need for Spotify to negotiate and contract with 8 Mile for a more expensive direct voluntary mechanical licensing agreement. I mean, this is pretty tough language.
Yeah, and I think so. To explain kind of what all this boils down to, um, the couple of pieces that really kind of undermine Spotify and Harry Fox in their argument are the fact that Harry Fox has known for years who owns these compositions, and Spotify, via Harry Fox, is issuing NOIs on the basis that they don't know who owns the song, so we're just gonna NOI them until we can find the right licensee or licensor. And a lot of this, rightly so, has to do with the impending enforcement of the Music Modernization Act and the instantiation of the Music Mechanical Licensing Committee under that act, which would, under the shifting tides of the industry, would preclude 8 Mile Style from seeking any kind of legal recourse or compensatory action for issues of misallocated royalties, underpaid by virtue of the streams being underreported. All that Spotify would have to do would then just go to audit itself and say, oh yeah, you're right, there's some missing here, here's what was missing. But under the current paradigm, without the MMA, 8 Mile Style can say, you underpaid us, and that's infringement. And so you're now on the hook for way more than you would otherwise have been on the hook for. Now, obviously, Spotify has been sued a few times with regard to mechanical royalties. And so they obviously have an interest in not being on the hook for these legal settlements. But the piece that really kind of hurts from my perspective, as a bit of a crusader for music rights, is the way that Harry Fox, especially during its time as a company under the NMPA, handled a lot of the information and failed to transmit it to Spotify and get these licenses in place when they had the chance at the beginning. And the NMPA is one of the parties that sued Spotify for the infringement of music copyrights and the underpayment of royalties. For, mind you, $25 million in the settlement, supposed to be spread out across all afflicted parties, which is peanuts compared to the scale of it. And then the end result is that members of the NMPA then can't then re-sue Spotify separately because they're part of the class action, right? And so now we have issues like this where the NMPA got a tiny little settlement that only really helps the major three, and companies like 8 Mile Style are left out in the cold, more or less. Then this comes out that while NMPA owned HFA, HFA was abetting Spotify in the gross underpayment of royalties, and then also precluding publishers from seeking damages as a result. So it's kind of like, it's 6 layers of fraud, allegedly.
It's a shit show sandwich and multi-layered, like it's a club sandwich.
Yeah, exactly. It's just everything you can possibly imagine going wrong. So suffice it to say, this is a really hairy one. I'm going to be watching this closely. I'm no fan of Harry Fox Agency. I've been out in public on that in the past. Like, it's a dated organization doing, it's bare minimum at best on its best day, mostly on paper when we could be digital. A lot of the issues could have been circumvented years ago if they just kind of kept upgrading the way that some of the PROs have, and especially the way that some of the mechanical societies in foreign countries have, that I've been really impressed by. But here we are.
They're the old house down the block that takes forever to, get up to current speed. I mean, HFA was, dealing with them years ago. It's like, why can't I do all this online? Every other rights organization has all this great online information. I can register, I can file claims. It's like an HFA is just, so the ship, it just won't turn. And I think that's what it's stuck in its lane. And it's just kind of like, let it go out to sea is what you're saying.
Well, I think that just to kind of put a cap on it and to keep, to extend that metaphor, Harry Fox saw the icebergs and said, you know what, we can't steer, so we have to go through the icebergs. But in order to make everybody think that this is normal, we're just going to tell everybody, oh, there's just icebergs everywhere. There's nothing we can do about it. when in reality, everybody has a chance to steer clear if given that chance, and HFA kind of robs them of that chance and then defrauds them.
All right, we're going to steer clear of the icebergs, and I'm just going to throw this over here and call that one a wrap.